Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is a show all about implanting hope in our hearts. I'm Bill Snyder, joined by my friend Ann DeSantis. We're glad you're here for our uplifting conversation about faith and how it sustains our hearts through all the seasons of life. Thanks for walking with us.
Hi, and good evening. Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is Ann DeSantis, and my co-host Bill will not be able to join us tonight, so we make a shout out to Bill as he's just not able to make this podcast, and you know, family first. And of course, it's summer and a busy time for all of us. So thank you all for joining us here. And I have an amazing guest for all of you. I have my friend, Leslie Cree, and I want to read her bio because she has a wonderful bio. She is a BA IBCLC, International Board Certified Lactation Consultant working at a hospital in Harrisburg, PA. She's also chair of the Pennsylvania Coalition, an organization that brings together persons and groups involved in projects supporting breastfeeding initiatives to ensure providers and families have resources and education to meet their breastfeeding goals. Leslie is the proud mother of 2 children, a daughter, Madeline, and a son, Samuel. Both were homeschooled for several years, attended public high schools, and graduated from university. Now, as mostly an empty nesters, Leslie and her husband, John, of 30 years, John are enjoying tackling long neglected home improvement projects and getting out to see friends now that the pandemic restrictions have been lifted. I love that bio. Leslie, welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's nice to see you and hear your voice and reconnect now that the pandemic is starting to lift the restrictions. You know, we're kind of getting out again. It's wonderful.
It really is wonderful. And you and I did a podcast, I believe it was last summer, with Bill Snyder and I on Sowing Hope, and your son, Sam. I'm sorry, it wasn't last summer. It was November. It was November of 2020.
It was a while because Sam was just getting started with his senior year at West Virginia University, and there was so much going on with the election coming up.
That's
and
right.
We were mid shutdown or lockdown. It was a lot. It was a lot going on.
Exactly. And so it's great to have you back again, this time just you and I. And for those who don't know Leslie and I have been friends for so many years. And even though she used to live in my area, she moved, I believe it was around 2003, wasn't it? That Leslie moved from the Philadelphia area. Maybe it was 2004.
I think so. Years fly by, don't they?
They
Our
do.
girls were about 7. Our older girls were about 7, I think, 6, 7.
That's right.
Yeah. Wow.
And so it was a long time ago, but God always keeps together those that are meant to stay together, I think. And
He totally does. He totally does.
And we met, to give everybody a little history here, a long, long time ago when we both had our first daughters. They were the same age pretty much. And we both had attended a breastfeeding meeting in our area. At the time it was called, where we lived, it was called Abington Nursing Mothers. And from across a room, I saw Leslie, and I was observing she and the interaction that she had with her daughter, Madeline. And I was just amazed because I could see that as young as Madeline was, they had a bond that you don't always see with such a young child below the age of 1. And so I got a little courage, and I walked over and I said, I told her my name, and I basically said, I love the way that you parent your daughter. And I said to her, have you ever heard of attachment parenting? And that's kind of how that conversation began. And so here we are 25 almost years later. And that's what this discussion is going to be about, having to do with Leslie's work as a lactation consultant. And also that she and I both did that thing called attachment parenting, which we will unpack during this podcast. You remember that, Leslie? That time?
I remember it, and I'm getting a little teary because
yeah, me too.
The backstory for me was I have a postpartum anxiety and depression. And of course, back then, everybody just said, you know, aren't you lucky? You're staying home with your baby. Everybody gets a little bit of baby blues. You don't confess these things because you don't want, you really don't even know what it is that's wrong. But I had drugged myself to that meeting, and, anxiety the whole way, and enjoyed the meeting. I always enjoyed nursing mothers immensely when I did go and get that fellowship. But when you had come up and introduced yourself, I remember you saying, that you saw our bonding and our attachment, and you called it attachment parenting, which was so beautiful. I called it barely hanging on. My daughter was very intense, high need child. She's very highly gifted intellectually, and she was like that from the word go. And really to have been uplifted by someone who, you just kind of said, I saw you. And I said, you saw me. And you saw me. And I just think that our bond was like instantaneous. And, the Lord does bring people together into your lives, sometimes for a lifetime, sometimes for a season. But those interactions really uplift someone. And, I kind of go by that philosophy, if you will, in my work. My job is to provide information, some coaching, education, but a lot of uplifting. It's very important that we uplift each other and we uplift our mothers.
I'm so proud of the work that you're doing, honestly.
Ditto, girl, ditto.
Because we were on that journey together with breastfeeding and not real sure. We knew that it was good for our babies. We knew that it was nutritionally perfect food. We knew that there was good bonding there. But it was right around that time that our babies were turning about a year old, when everybody was saying, when you're going to wean, that kind of thing.
Oh, yep.
And we were one of those people, mothers, that decided that we were going to do the whole child-led weaning. And not to get into the ages that they wean. We don't need to do that today on this podcast, because everybody's different with that. It's all different. But certainly when you go beyond the year, and maybe even that second year, you're going to be in that minority of people, mothers, who decide that they are going to wait and see those signs of when the child is getting ready to wean, because there's benefits to, and anytime after a year or 15 months, what they call long-term breastfeeding, and there's great benefits to it. And we're going to unpack both of those things, because I think talking about the benefits in the first year, and also, of course, when you do decide to continue. But I'm so glad that I had somebody like you, my friend, my wonderful friend, who we went on this journey step by step together, and we learned so much. And, we met people who were on the same page with us. And also we did meet some moms that kind of interacted with us that didn't understand, that wanted to do things a little differently. And that's okay too, because it's everyone's right to do it as they see fit for their child. Right. But you and I learned together that this was a wonderful thing that deserves to be opened up to the world, and say, you know what, this has a great purpose, not just for health, for bonding, psychological reasons. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why it's good. It's very good.
It's sometimes, it's just easier. There's so many things now, all these gadgets, and, use this particular rocker, this particular, method, to cuddle up your baby, your young child, and just give them a little, of course they all had the pet name, ours was Nana, and to just give a little Nana, and restore that bond, and center that toddler. And sometimes those times that you sit and nurse, you feel at first, oh, I'm just sitting here again. But you realize, and now with, 25 years of seasoning on it, you're growing a little human.
Yes.
And you give so much of your child, and the Lord really does see all the little things you do as a mother, and really does provide some reward. If you're in that, you're in the trenches right now, and you're really in that exhaustion phase, it is a season. Encouragement always to reach out. I think that so many times, especially with pandemic, people really do feel isolated, but that little bit of outreach, and yes, it's nice to find people that are doing what you're doing, to find that tribe, to support each other, but also to realize that your circle has so many diverse people in it, and everyone has that purpose, and that we uplift each other, and we get so much, even if we would think on the surface, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. I'm not sure I really agree with that, but we can all learn from each other valuable things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, everything that you're saying, that I'm on board with, because moms and dads, and just like people, we all come in different shapes, sizes, personalities, temperaments. I mean, the list goes on. And the decision making that we do with our parenting is a very personal thing. And one of those decisions is the feeding of your child, which you and I know, Leslie, that breastfeeding isn't just feeding, right?
It's
It's so much more than
so
that.
much more of a dynamic. Yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
So, but a lot of it, and some of this, the Leche League philosophies, um, that you are relationship building and you're trust building, and not to say that those emotions and those bonds don't form from other methods of feeding or duration of breastfeeding, but that we are given a gift in our children. The Lord gifts us with His precious children, and to take those steps back and seek that insight, and going forward, making those plans, realizing of course that children will always delight in giving you a surprise to your plans, and got to drop back and regroup. But you think about what I've learned how to navigate as an adult, as a parent: resiliency, flexibility. Sometimes you get a little bit of what they say, like pie in the face, but you go on, and you get a sense of humor about it.
Yeah, you have grown so much in all of this, because you and I learn together as parents. And then you made a good point, because when you're in the midst of whatever your parenting season is, whether it's the babyhood, toddlerhood, and you think, oh my goodness, when is this going to be over? Because if there's going to be, like, as Christians, like that cross, right? We're carrying that cross, but
Yes.
the cross is our crown too, right? So when we're carrying that cross and saying, my goodness, what I'm doing here, this attachment parenting, it's hard. And it is challenging. But the gifts that you get from that relationship that you develop with your child is so worth it. And like you said, you're building the trust. And I do think that trust lasts a lifetime, because and I don't think that what I'm about to say, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you attachment parent or breastfeed or long-term breastfeed or whatever, does it guarantee that you're going to have a close relationship with your adult child? I don't necessarily think that that's true. It doesn't guarantee it, but I certainly think you're on a good path when you follow your parenting instincts in the decisions that you make, right? So it makes a difference long-term in those relationships.
I think it does too, because I remember back in the day, um, a lot of times, folks would sort of see that it looked like we were perhaps elevating our child, doing for. And a lot of what attachment parenting is, and in a lot of ways, breastfeeding through until your child is ready, is you're also boundary setting and limit setting.
Yes.
You're teaching your child how to respect their own boundaries, their own self, but also your boundaries and yourself. So
Mm.
going through those processes, it's a partnership, and it goes from being, the full parent, and now that our children are grown, we're mentors, we're friends. So attachment parenting isn't being your child's buddy, but it's
Yes.
being your child's anchor. And you're teaching a lot about interpersonal relationships. And I remember we would really navigate those discussions where people would say, you should put them to bed and cry it out, or, it's time for you to wean, and you need to put your foot down. And we didn't see the world that way. And, our loving God does not see the world that way. If you look at, all the scripture, He wants us, we start out as child. He brings us through, they say you have the milk and then later the meat, and you get to a point with the Lord that you come to Him as as your father, but as your father mentor. But we are corrected, and we are given boundaries, and we are given unconditional love. And to me, that kind of sums up where parenting is. And yes, you may have a prodigal, but knowing in front of the Lord that you did your best, and then, knowing that you can set boundaries with that prodigal if you need to.
That's so beautiful. It really is, because I think as parents, aren't we always growing and learning? I
I grow
do.
and learn every day. I learn from,
Oh.
my job is supposed to, I guess maybe be considered advisory in the hospital,
Mhm.
meeting with the new families, and I learn every day something new from the parents that I see, these brand new parents. Sometimes it's their second, third, fourth baby, but with even first time holding their baby, doing that skin to skin,
Mm.
I learn from them. I'm truly blessed to do the work I do.
Mm. Once again, I know I keep saying this, but like I'm so proud of what you're doing. And I do want to mention to the people listening too that if you want to listen to some other shows with Leslie as a guest, we did do another Sowing Hope episode you can listen to, because every time you listen to a podcast, you get more information about someone. You don't always get to touch on the same things. So, and then she was a guest on RVN TV when I was there as a live studio show in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And you can go to my YouTube channel. I have the video right there on DeSantis YouTube, and you can watch Leslie and I interacting there. And that was a good conversation. So yeah, this is all great stuff. So kind of turning to your work. So what is it like for you day to day with consulting? What
So
is it like for you?
now, where I am in lactation consultants kind of see a broad spectrum, but my particular role where I work, it's hospital. I mostly circulate to the newborns. So the period immediately after birth, those first, 36 to maybe 72 hours, while mother and baby are hospital, and kind of really working on getting mother comfortable with reading baby's cues and signals, positioning baby comfortably, making sure that mother and baby are feeding well together. So there is some clinical aspect. We do evaluate or assess, mother's health and comfort and safety, and also infants' capabilities, reflexes, and so there are some generalities. We kind of teach in how to make sure you can tell your baby's drinking, getting enough, but also, you customize person to person. These are two brand new personalities interacting, because the mother is a new role you take on. We're getting to know baby, teaching parents a little bit about the science of it. This is the milk production, cycle, and this is why your newborn does what they do. And just kind of I kind of consider it as getting people a launch pad. And then we also have outpatient services. So parents are always encouraged, if they have birthed at our facility, to call as they're on their journey if they have questions, because things change pretty drastically. But also part of my job is to interact with staff. So teaching, providing information. I was blessed to be able to do an interview for World Breastfeeding Week that will air next week here locally on week 104. And, to really spread the word. And we do also have an advocacy component. So even though my other hat as chair of the Pennsylvania Breastfeeding Coalition is not really subsidized by my workplace employment, there is an advocacy component to being a staff lactation consultant. So we are planning a lot of things for World Breastfeeding Week. I interact with our diversity and inclusion and vice president, making sure that we are serving and reaching everyone with the information and the support that they need, and recognizing cultural differences, religious customs, cultural background, so that our parents are getting hopefully as supportive care that they can. Because other cultures, we have a lot of folks from Nepal, we have a lot of folks Spanish speaking Hispanic culture, a lot of African culture, that they're getting care that is uplifting them and not just saying this is America way. So it's very interesting, multifaceted job. And so, some of it's grounded in the science or the biology, but a lot of it is counseling and making sure that mother's needs are met so she can meet her child's needs.
Beautiful. You're really dealing with the whole person and your interaction, not just with mom and baby, but with the family, the dad, the other people that are involved. And so I love the work that you're doing. And now you're in the Harrisburg area. Can you tell us, for people who might be listening to this podcast that live near you and your area, and if they want to reach out to you, how would they get in touch? Because maybe someone they know is pregnant or needs some help. Now, do you ever help people also that are outside of the area? Because I'd love to put that within our podcast, conversation here.
So where we are now and the way health systems are designed, generally speaking, if you need help going back to the hospital where you birthed or had your baby. So for the Harrisburg area, if you birthed at Harrisburg hospitals, has a phone number that you get with your discharge packet. You can also go onto a website. So the UPMC Harrisburg lactation, you can just kind of put that in and go on the website. There are in various communities, WIC is usually very active to help mothers. If someone's listening that is a WIC participant or WIC client, you can reach out. There are a lot of really good resources that you can access online to get someone close to you. So the PA breastfeeding.org has some information for Pennsylvania. You can also go to La Leche League International, find a helper near you. Some places have, it's called Breastfeeding USA, is another peer-based counselor, trained counselor access point. In some communities and cities, pediatricians have IBCLCs. So reaching out and starting local, and super important, a lot of times, even with the resource lists provided in the mothers groups, folks will sometimes call and say, well, I tried out this and that I heard online or that I read online. To get care that is custom for you and your situation, reach out to someone who can personally interact with you when at all possible.
Yes.
Because that we know you, we can talk to you, we can get a little bit of history from you and make sure that things are working well, rather than like a lot of people reach out online. And I know, again, during the pandemic, we feel like we had a lot of choices, but the online is sort of general. They don't know you, your situation, your philosophy, your baby, any of it. So always, plug into a resource from perhaps where you birthed or someone in your community, and really, make sure that you have as much contact as you can. Some communities have lactation consultants that private practice. They can come to your home, and some areas, Nurse Family Partnership has trained their nurses to help with lactation. If you, somebody who's listening, if you reach out and, perhaps you don't get the reception you expected or the information that supports you, second opinions are totally a thing. So trying again with someone, a lot of times we'll hear, oh, I talked to lactation with my last baby and they didn't really help. And we're always very sorry that we couldn't help someone, but this is very personality driven. So if something doesn't, resonate with you, you feel like you didn't get help, you can always reach out to another source. You reach out to like a La Leche League leader or someone to plug you in. For Pennsylvania, you could do information at pabreastfeeding.org. The coalition is not a direct mother care provider relationship, but we can resource people to someone in their area.
Oh, thank you so much. That's a lot of great information.
It's a lot, and we're really working
great.
towards building, recognizing state and countrywide. There is a very big deficit in access to help with breastfeeding, and it is a shame that it is kind of put on the parent to reach out. At this point, it's not a given that you can just ring up a certain number, but starting local is usually can find someone, and then widen your circle as needed.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, because when you're a new mom, and a lot of times moms come from like working full time or part time. I think a lot of times you would know better than I would. But with that said, sometimes people don't have the resources right away.
Yeah.
And they're coming from a different place. And so when you hear that idea of starting local, it's kind of like when they say when you eat and buy things locally, it's good.
Right.
It's the same thing.
Absolutely.
So I love that. And I will say this, I mean, you and I had our first children, Elaine was born in September of 1996. Maddie was born in June of 1996. And, life was different back then. I think there was internet, but, most people didn't even use email that much. I don't think at all. I know I didn't. We didn't really start using email, I think, until like maybe about 1997 or 98. And so with that said, it's a different world where you can just pick up your phone and Google breastfeeding and think you're getting the best information. And you probably can get some good information. But Leslie made a good point that people are all different. You have different style, you have different parenting beliefs, and a different schedule, and a different family, and a different baby for that matter, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's all great information to know. Now, do you know the website for La Leche League? I think they're just a wealth of information in terms of
Yeah, this is
learning
just
about what we talked about earlier about the attachment parenting.
Yeah, I think it's just LLLI.org, or if you search engine, Google or Bing or whomever, not to put corporate names out there, but you put into your search and it will pop up the website. And then they have that, it's all different languages. You can translate if your English is not your preferred first language. And they also have like a menu item that you can go in and find someone local to you. So it's online information that is accurate, evidence-based, and supportive, but it's also access to local information. And, I kind of also want to put out there, when you're going online, there are folks who may have had health complications, or their infant has health complications, that online answers really might be a little detrimental to your effort. So making sure that if there is any misgivings about how baby is doing with diaper output, weight gain, growing as child gets older, that the pediatric and the OB or the midwife are on board with this, because there are a lot of dynamics here that take place physically. And if you go online and they'll say, oh, your baby should just breastfeed more. That can work.
Mm-hmm.
Sure can. Nurse more often. But what if there's something that a doctor needs to look at with mom to help her produce milk? What if it's something the baby's having trouble, extracting the milk? So making sure that there's eyes on, and, listen, moms, always, always, always listen to your heart. If you feel like something isn't right, it's not going right, reach out. Sometimes they'll say, oh, my doctor said the baby's doing fine. You have to feel fine in your heart that this is going well. It is okay to get second opinions. It is okay to get third opinions, and, really integrate what you're learning and best use it to your satisfaction.
Totally agree. And I don't know, I'm sure you've heard this before, and it always made me laugh because jokingly I said, that I must be somewhat intelligent, I guess. Jokingly, I say that because the more questions you ask, they say the sign of someone who's intelligent, right, is someone who asks a lot of questions.
Keep asking. Absolutely.
Yeah. And kiddingly, I say, I remember being in class where the teacher said, you asked too many questions or something, but I you know what I'm saying, but the point of it is that kiddingly, I say, I jokingly say, well, then I must be pretty smart. LOL. Right. But don't feel that asking questions makes you like a pain in the butt or something to someone, because the more questions you ask, that's how you get information. And you have to go to different sources too, if that makes sense. You have to go to different sources to get answers, and make sure you go to the right source too. Like Leslie said, that personal connection is very important. And someone like Leslie, who's a certified lactation consultant. And so if she's in your area, I mean, I can't say enough good. She's the one you want to get in touch with.
Oh my goodness, great. Feeling a little overwhelmed about that. But
Yeah.
definitely, I kind of like what you said about asking questions. And I'd say at any point in wherever you are, whatever you're doing, if someone tells you you ask too many questions, that person is in the wrong.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Always someone should welcome your questions and answer them to your satisfaction.
That's right, because this is your baby's life. This is your life. This is your relationship with your baby. I just want to say one other thing is that if it weren't for a lactation consultant, because when Elaine was born, breastfeeding wasn't going all that great for the first week. And I didn't even know about something like the Nursing Mothers group. But thankfully, someone from my Nursing Mothers group called me. And she wanted to check on me. When I told her what was going on, she said, doesn't sound too good. And she was the one that said, you need to get a lactation consultant to your house. And if I did not do that, I'll tell you, I would not have fed Elaine, my older daughter. And so I thank God that I did, because it was a wonderful experience being able to do that. It saved a lot of money. We know that. I mean, it saved a lot of money because I did not supplement. Aside from the very beginning when we were having those issues, we were supplementing a little bit, but then I'm realizing that we figured out the problem and then was able to do that exclusively. So that was a real gift. What you're doing is really helping babies and helping mothers and families. So it's just a beautiful thing. Another question, we had like a little less list of questions we wanted to try to tackle is, tell us, how has it changed over the years? Because you've been involved with it for quite a while.
I have, and it's actually one of the biggest changes is your access point to getting lactation. I remember with Abington Nursing Mothers and that whole regional Nursing Mothers Advisory Council was a cooperative arrangement with hospitals where we filled out that little postcard. Would you like someone from the Nursing Mothers counselors to call you and check on you? Now with HIPAA and the way hospitals are, those arrangements don't really take place that much anymore. So you don't have someone in your community who is like maybe authorized to call just on a postcard and introduce themselves and say, I just called to check on you, how your breastfeeding is going. So, and things are moving faster and faster. So a lot of times moms don't have the leave time. They're supposed to go back to work. So you're trying to tackle recovering, getting to know your baby, getting no sleep, and trying to work out with breastfeeding. But yet in the back of your mind is, I'm going to have to make plans to collect my milk from the pump and leave my baby. So there's a whole nother layer here of pressure that, fortunately where we were at in our lives, it economically made more sense for me to stay home. We sold our car, my husband took the train, we lived near the city, and I had more expenses once you figured in childcare and daycare, more expenses to work than to stay home. So we ended up, that I stayed home, but not everyone has that option or choice, and so the pressure is really increased. The other thing that has changed is medical complexity. We recognize as our culture and society, we have the obesity epidemic, we have the opioid epidemic, we have folks coming into their childbearing years maybe a little later than back in our day, but also coming in with more health challenges at the get-go. And those are challenges that require more clinical oversight. So that messaging has gotten out, breast is breast, breast is best, and it's natural. But when you've got other health challenges going on, this is going to need some intervention and coaching to make sure that you meet your goals. And it's very easy to get discouraged because you're already doing something brand new, something you're worrying about intensely, and the guidance points, aren't there until you kind of reach out, because there is not that contact point where someone calls you. I don't know if you remember back when you had Elaine, but when I had Maddie, a nurse, we had like Capital Blue Cross, whatever, insurance, a nurse came to your house to weigh your baby, to check on you, to
Yes.
check on your now. And then by the time I had Sam in 1999, that program had discontinued. And so, you had said with Elaine, your journey, my journey with Sam, I had a really good experience breastfeeding Maddie. And along came Sam. We had a tongue tie. He wasn't doing well. I reached out because I already had networked the resources for breastfeeding. But if he had been my first child, I don't know where the Lord would have taken my life. The trajectory would have been completely different.
Yeah, I do
Because with
recall
my
all that.
second feeding wasn't working. And, by that point, people were like, oh my goodness, you're so into this, you're practically a lactation consultant. What do you think? I said, what I think is I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And, everybody needs somebody to reach out to. And we didn't have that nurse to come to the house that time. And just by luck of it, I was resourced enough by that point. But I really do think both of our lives would have been totally different without that interventive help.
Oh, yeah. What a difference it made. And I recall those challenges that you had with Sam and was so glad that you worked it all out. And God helped you work it out too.
He did.
It was
He
just
did. I
amazing
was on
how
my knees
worked.
every day.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was such a good experience with even with all of the trials and challenges that both of us had some issues with it, because it doesn't always go perfectly all the time. And I thought we could backtrack a little bit because I mentioned the term attachment parenting, which I think became popular probably right around the time or a little bit before we had our first oldest, each of us. And I had no idea what it was. And the one thing that I will say to people listening is we're talking a lot about breastfeeding, but even if you're not breastfeeding, you can still do something called attachment parenting and just check it out. I thought maybe, Leslie, could you talk to us a little bit about your experience with it? And when you see people who do attachment parenting with their babies, does it make a difference for them and for the baby?
Mhm. So I don't hear the phrase attachment parenting attached to it so much anymore. But there's been a lot of movement. Back when we had our kids, everything that came kind of from the hierarchy was to limit feeding times, put your baby on a schedule, don't nurse more than this many minutes. And in these quarter century, my goodness, there's been a lot of recognition that now what they call responsive feeding or cue-based feeding. Sometimes they used to say feed on demand, but some people thought demand was a little bit too harsh of a word. But pretty much building in from the very beginning to read what your infant is telling you. And if you know what to look for, you can really kind of help figure out what they're trying to tell you. So you're looking for those little signs of interest that your baby would maybe need to nurse or need comfort, sucking their hands, rooting around. I call it the little chicken peck head when you're holding a baby. And so that responsive feeding, also turns into, responsive nighttime parenting. So back in the day, everybody had the nursery down the hall and you were supposed to have your baby just cry it out. And then there was oh, but you could get a monitor and watch them cry. And now the American Academy of Pediatrics is saying that their recommendation is that infant has a sleep space right next to the parental bed, so that the baby's pack and play or little bassinet, whatever, is right next to the parent bed, and that they've recognized the importance of proximity for SIDS reduction, but also you do develop that rhythm and that responsiveness. And once you've started to build in that contact, so that early newborn, it's all pretty much physical parenting. You're holding, you're rocking, you're burping, you're feeding, changing diapers, doing gentle bath. The physical trust builds the emotional trust. And so if you're kind of doing more of these currently recommended theories, philosophies, I'm not sure how to say it, but you're kind of building in that attachment parenting ethos. And, you're kind of automatically starting to dial in to what you would notice about your child. Some children need held more than others. Some children need a little bit of personal space. They'll let you know if they want you to kind of put them down and give them a minute. And then you start to be able to read that toddler. You say, okay, I know we're getting a little cranky, maybe a little hungry. Maybe that second stop on our errands needs to wait because, we need to go home and get a nap. Or, whatever it is, but you start to really develop that nuance when you're tuned into your child, and that builds that attachment bond. And then your child is building a trust bond with you. They first, parent is the regulator, temperature, nutrition, hydration, comfort. And then as child grows and steps away, you're still that like home base. And so having built that home base is what really furthers that relationship, and I think really forms that attachment, parenting. So it's really rather collaborative, and it's constantly evolving as your child matures. Your child's able to handle more on their own. You're guiding them through. So you're not going to parent a newborn the same way you parent a grade schooler. You're not going to parent a grade schooler the same way as you parent a high schooler. But I think sometimes the more authoritative or restrictive parenting, that was sort of that counterpoint to attachment parenting, was that, you were authoritarian and your kids were going to toe the line. They're going to go on a schedule. They're going to do their chores. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. And you don't really build in trust because you're using your will to them. And attachment parenting is saying, okay, this is my child's personality. I know what I need to guide into my child for these values and to have them be self-reliant, but this is how we do this for each child. I parented both of my children very, very differently. Same mom, but two completely different children. What worked for Maddie didn't work for Sam. What worked for Sam never would have flown with Maddie. But that adaptation took place, I think, because we were so tuned in. You could kind of see who needed what. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes so much sense. I mean, some of the words that you used as I was trying to really actively listen to you: tuned in, responsiveness, trust building. They're great words. And these are all things that you keep in mind throughout your parenting experience, whether it's that newborn baby with breastfeeding, the toddler, whether they're in elementary school, high school, and even like Leslie and I, kids that are in their 20s, right? I mean, you're still doing that trust building, the responsiveness, all of that in the relationship. So thank you for sharing on that. And, we got about 10 more minutes left of the podcast. I thought we could touch on, if we could, any advice that you might have for parents, especially ones that they are going to breastfeed, the wife is going to breastfeed, and maybe touch on why breastfeeding is, in quotes, the best. And I do think it is.
So, there's been more and more understood about breast milk composition, the act of breastfeeding. So if you look strictly at, where people kind of, I think, enter the interest, they'll say, are you going to, do breast or bottle? Like they're interchangeable substances. Breast milk is unique. It's dynamic. It is an immune system transfer. It is proteins. It is long chain fatty acids for eye and brain development. Breast milk is targeted every time baby is fed from the breast. They're getting everything they need, and it's real time. And so one of the most exciting things, if you fast forward to COVID, is, mothers who had exposure to COVID or that had a vaccine have antibodies. They pass that passive immunity to the child. But also breast milk has components, immune cells that can actually attack viruses. It can attack novel pathogens. And it can provide protection. So it protects from the very first feeds called colostrum. It's a thick, sticky, rich substance until your milk, quote, comes in. Your body has provision for that child in the right quantity, in the right viscosity, coats the gut. And some of the longer term, you have infants who are less sick, or if your child does get sick, it's less severity of illness. But also from the very beginning, the act of breastfeeding heals mother. the hormones that are released contract the uterus.
Mm.
Gets postpartum bleeding is controlled, gets mother back to that pre-pregnant uterus tone and position in the body, so mom kind of tucks back in. It can delay your period, which is nice for family planning. Having those activities can also decrease anemia. Mothers who breastfeed have less risk of developing breast cancer. They have less risk of ovarian cancer, I think even uterine cancer, diabetes. So even if you're a type 2, gestational diabetic, you have less risk further on of having type 2 or other diabetes complications. So they're just really scratching the surface of what this process is, what it does, what it provides. So it's something that, as parents are considering options, how can you get the education to get a good start and find that support team to help you reach your goals, because it does take a team. It sounds very easy to say, I'm going to breastfeed, but then you realize I'm very tired. I just had a baby. I need help with things. And as you're getting ready to go back to work, having that team, so it's like you can find the childcare that's near you, or perhaps bring baby to work over lunchtime to nurse. Those little things that 9 months goes by awfully quickly. But finding out all you can, taking a breastfeeding class, taking childbirth class, and building that support network, and really letting yourself rely on them.
And isn't it so awesome that you're part of all of that? I mean, you are part of all of that support system. And
Yes.
I keep saying for the millionth time how proud I am of what you're doing. And you're absolutely right about something else. I just want to make a note to say this, is that you're so right that I know that they continue to find out more and more. And I remember that when I had my second daughter, Sean, and had to get some information about, that I had a problem, a health problem that was related to my heart. Thank God everything is fine. I have nothing wrong with me now. But at the time I needed to get some information about medication. And I found out that there was, I think it was in Rochester, New York, but some type of a research center that was all about researching breastfeeding. And I contacted them, and they were able to help me about this medicine that I was taking, about was I able to still breastfeed and take this medicine? And guess what? I was able to. And it was one of the best days for me to find out that I could continue to breastfeed, even though I was going through this health crisis and did have to take some kind of medicine. But the amount of medicine, or the amount of it that went through the breast milk, was so minuscule, if any, that it was fine. So, so that was a beautiful thing. But you're right. They're continuing to find out more about how wonderful breastfeeding really is. And not to say, if moms are listening, or people who have bottle fed their children, as I said, with what we used to call it attachment parenting, but with this responsive parenting, you can do this no matter what your situation is. You can do this.
So, and I think the timing is nice now, because it is coming up on, World Breastfeeding Week, but also now the United States and Pennsylvania is calling it Breastfeeding Month. So, this has been a breastfeeding focused program, but a lot of the parenting and the bonding that is a relationship that is above and beyond milk, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we have a lot of times there's this sense of absolutism. Oh, well, I may not have the kind of job where I can pump, so I might as well not breastfeed. A lot of mothers and families successfully combine using breastfeeding and formula at the same time.
Yes.
You breastfeed as much as you can when you're together. If you're apart, your baby gets some formula. You're still doing very nice things. So for some reason, that implication got out there that it's like all or nothing. It's either all breastfeeding or it's all formula feeding. So some moms maybe don't realize that combination feeding works for some families. And what you're still providing with breast milk is that immune system, Breast milk has stem cells. You can express them off, put it on a
Wow.
burn, heals it right up. So even if somebody says, I can only breastfeed once a day, that's a huge once a day.
Mm,
And so, that's also something
important.
that's, there used to be kind of this mentality that, it was all or nothing. And, most people are realizing reality is everything, not this or, but this and that.
Mm. I'm so
So
glad you addressed that, honestly,
it's,
because even my mind kind of went to sort of the ors, but
yeah.
you're right. I mean, and people do this successfully. And like Leslie said, even if you do it once, twice a day, the benefits are there. It's amazing. And so now we're headed toward the end of the podcast. And I wanted to touch a little bit on faith before we end, because that's something that we both share. And over the years, sharing that faith in Christ and the faith that has sustained our friendship and also all the ups and downs of life. What has your faith meant to you in terms of parenting, and how has your prayer life affected your day-to-day living?
So it's a great question. And I did kind of allude to, my children are very wonderful young people, outstanding citizens, doing very well, but neither are really faithful. My husband and I see differently on faith. I'm a Christian. He is, he says he's a believer, but the prioritization is different. So it's been me and the Lord.
Mm.
And I just put everyone in prayer. And seeing what miracles he has wrought in your life. I still say, I have a friend who was healed by a miracle, certifiable. Take what you will, but I saw the Lord at work. I saw his hand. And there's affirmations that come through, big and little. And sometimes I'll pray, I don't know, to have the right to have you verify yourself to me, Lord, but, can you give me a little something today? And something will always come up, a gospel song on the radio. I had an event that I wanted to do when I was working. My boss called and said, can you do me a favor and switch days? I said, I can do you the favor. Those little things. But I'll tell you, especially, during the pandemic, I would come home every night and just lay it all out, because the healthcare workers are under tremendous pressure. Because when we are on the job, it is game on. Our patients deserve our best. They deserve us to be cheerful and optimistic and reassuring. And, to that really depletes the emotional well. And I say, without, Jesus' hand on my shoulder, this wouldn't have happened. None of this would ever be successful. You would never see an optimistic day during something like a pandemic without faith. And knowing that he has the plan and he will see it through, and holding steady and watching the way that his will manifest has been incredible. And I know I can't wait to see what's going to happen next week and next year. But really spending a lot of the pandemic just in prayer has been the life source.
Well, first I want to say how much I value you and our friendship over these years of almost 25 years of friendship. What a blessing that's been. And not to predict the future, but Leslie's a lifetime friend. I don't have any doubt that she and I will be together for as long as we're here. And then when we pass on too.
I say we'll be in that mansion together. We'll have our rockers next to each other and our cup of tea, and we'll just say all the cool things that the Lord has done, and just keep on. I think that there are eternal bonds, and I do believe this is an eternal bond.
It is. It
Friendship, sisterhood. Absolutely.
I got it. This is audio and people can't see my smile. I've been crying and smiling at the same time because, and we do have to end in a minute here, but Leslie was with me during that difficult time. This is the Sowing Hope podcast where we sow hope into broken hearts. And Bill and I came together because both of us had suffered something to do with our hearts. I had a disease after my second pregnancy, which some of you know, peripartum cardiomyopathy, where, it was kind of a life death situation for me. And she's right. Not only was I healed physically, but really psychologically, spiritually, all the way around. So Leslie was there by my side, and how much it means. Thank you for all you do for others. Thank you for being a wonderful friend, a wonderful wife and mother, a wonderful lactation consultant. Keep using that word wonderful. I could use all these other adjectives of terrific, fantastic, beautiful, awesome, but it's all there. So thank you again so much for being with us. Come back again to the Sowing Hope podcast, and hopefully next time Bill can join us too.
It would be my blessing. And I just want to say that, praise God for you. Just you for you. You're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We will see all of you next time on the Sowing Hope podcast. God bless.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Sowing Hope on Patchwork Heart Radio. For more information about this podcast and our ministries, visit our websites, patchworkheart.org and DeSantis.com. You can also follow and interact with us on Twitter at PWH Ministry or DeSantis 2.